about to watch is the authors of this research paper, Walter Humes and Mark Priestley, discussing curricular design with respect to curriculum for excellence. In the discussion, they'll discuss the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats afforded by curriculum for excellence.
There is some good stuff happening around curriculum for excellence, and for many teachers, curriculum for excellence, I think, is presenting an opportunity to reinvigorate their teaching, to think about first principles again, if they're inclined to do so. The danger is that many people won't do so because of a lack of a formulated process from the centre as to how they might do that, a lack of time and resources to engage and make sense of the curriculum in the way it should be. The big issue here is how we take the big ideas of the curriculum and the purposes of education and use them to develop different and innovative ways to do things. So curriculum for excellence, if we're serious about changing what young people do in schools and how they do it and what they learn, then we have to engage with those big ideas and derive from those clearly methods and content which are fit for purpose. And I don't think that's happening, because what we're doing is we're starting from the other end. It's very easy to take the outcomes and experiences and to say, what do we do already that meets these outcomes and experiences? What do we have to change or tweak in order to meet these outcomes and experiences? So what we're getting is an audit approach followed by minimal change, rather than an engagement with the big ideas and critical questions being asked about what do we need to do in order to meet those big ideas, what sort of content, what sort of methods are appropriate for developing responsible citizens, effective contributors, etc. And what needs to go in the school curriculum particularly, which isn't there already. One of my hobby horses, I suppose, is information literacy. If we start with the outcomes and experiences, it's easy to avoid the whole question of information literacy. If we start from questions of what sort of knowledge do young people need in order to become effective contributors, responsible citizens, etc., then it's very clear to many teachers that actually information literacy is an important area of knowledge required for modern day living. Why do we not do it in schools? Well, the structure of the curriculum, I think, is part of the problem. Takes us, of course, back to the title of the paper, doesn't it? I mean, clearly we've identified that with Curriculum for Excellence there has been an amnesia about curriculum theory, about previous curriculum developments, that it seems to have come almost like out of the ether. And you know, as I think A.V. Kelly described the English national curriculum, it was sprung and fully formed from the head of Zeus, without a great deal of thought about you know, the principles and purposes and philosophies and so on, and the underpinning theories. And we've ended up with something that structurally is incoherent as a result in some respects. Are we getting deja vu? That was the second part of our title.
Well, in the paper we compared the curriculum with, was it a 1912 English curriculum, and drew attention to similarities in terms of the structure and content. So, you know, although Curriculum for Excellence is presented as forward-looking and visionary and what the 21st century needs, it's remarkable how resilient the traditional structures have been.
So this is what I was quoted by Times Educational Supplement as describing as the polo-mint curriculum. We've specified subject groupings or areas which look very similar to what we've had before.
Yes.
We've actually not, though, specified the content that goes in that very firmly. So we're not getting changed because the subject boundaries, the categories haven't changed, and we're not getting changed because the failure to specify content in a way that reflects the needs of modern day living has been perhaps just superseded by, well, we've always taught history, and we've always taught Hitler, and we've always taught Scottish Wars of Independence, for example. We'll just carry on doing those without asking why we do them. So two forms of deja vu there, I guess.
I agree that the principles of Curriculum for Excellence, if properly developed, open up rich territory for a discussion of where Scottish education is going. I think that the reasons why that has not happened to the extent that I would like to see it are quite complex. Some of them have to do with the mixed messages to the teaching profession, but some of them also have to do with the characteristic modes of operation, so that the changes that are required for me are not just changes in what is happening in schools. What is also required is a fundamental change in the policy process and the implementation of policy. Although having said that, it's very difficult to think of a single change that would actually begin to break down the barriers that we've identified. There isn't a quick fix formula for this. It's partly to do with how the curriculum is conceptualized, but it's also to do with the structures that support schools, and it's also to do with the culture of teaching and the nature of professionalism, and to move forward on all of these fronts at once is actually a very challenging task.
Extremely ambitious, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'd like to suggest another form of deja vu here, which is to do with the way that assessment drives learning.
Yes.
5 to 14 was a worthy document, and when you look back at the literature which accompanies 5 to 14, you're actually struck by the same sort of sense of optimism and hope and aspiration which surrounded Curriculum for Excellence. In many ways, it had the same sort of principles and purposes. 5 to 14, for example, was underpinned by a view that formative assessment was very important, although that was subsequently lost. The way that it came into practice, of course, was that the outcomes came to drive the way that assessment happened, which then subsequently determined the way that people teach to the test. And I think that's been the case in primary and secondary schools. Curriculum for Excellence was supposed to break this mould, but of course we've seen an increasing shift towards seeing the outcomes and experiences as assessment standards.
You know, a question that I have very rarely seen addressed is, are some of these capacities more important than others? And in some ways you could say that successful learners is seen as the most important because it's the one that is, for instance, assessed in the examination system. It is, of course, quite difficult to assess the other capacities, but I think that's another example of a theoretical issue that needs to be thought through.
If we take, for example, the capacity of responsible citizen, it's something that's been critiqued by Priestley, for example, who has suggested that it suggests an almost social control view of citizenship, that good citizenship is about being responsible, it's about looking after neighbours, it's about picking up litter and caring for the environment, and what it tends to do is neglect the sort of vibrant civic engagement sort of aspects of citizenship which should be important. Political activism, for example, the capacity to ask awkward questions when required. And I don't think there's been an awful lot of discussion across the system, including at the policy level, about what responsible citizenship really is. There's just been an assumption that if people do as they're told, obey the law and act responsibly, then they are good citizens.
One of the interesting things about the reception of the original proposals was how quickly teachers were able to recite the 4 capacities. They could trot them out very readily, but if you actually pursued it and asked for a little bit more unpacking of what each meant, they were often struggling. And in a way that tells you quite a lot about the culture of Scottish education, in that the kind of critical discussion, contested debates about the meaning of key concepts is not really characteristic of the Scottish system. And I think that while there was general support for the broad principles of the original document, one of the issues that I think in retrospect needs to be looked at was why the subsequent developments proceeded in the way that they did. And my own reading, which I'm sure some people would not go along with, is that the leading agencies in the development, and namely the main curriculum body, Learning and Teaching Scotland, and Her Majesty's Inspectorate, have not historically been willing to engage in that kind of open-minded debate. They tend to move too quickly, or try to move too quickly, to what I call the soft consensus approach. And of course it is no accident that the word consensus begins with a con.
Indeed.